Thanks, guys. We have a pretty impressive panel here today of people who have gotten significant amounts of funding through the SBIR process. They've gotten funding through different agencies, and I think we should have a neat discussion about the different agencies and the experiences that they've gone through. With that, if I could ask you guys to introduce yourselves one at a time and talk a little bit about your company, who you've gotten funding from, and a little bit about your background.
All right.
Go.
Go on, Jim. All right, I'm Jim Langer. I'm co-founder of Serionix. So we're a company doing high-performance materials for air and water filtration. Our technology is capable of removing chemicals very efficiently and very quickly from an HVAC system or from a drinking water treatment unit. And our technology has pretty broad applications when you look at who we could market our technology to within the government and the SBIR programs. What we specifically have gone after within SBIR is the National Science Foundation, where we applied for and got a phase 1 and a phase 2 that we're basically in the middle of our phase 2 right now. And with the Army, went after a phase 1 and a phase 2 with them, and we're just sort of in the first quarter of our phase 2 with the Army. And we also applied for a USDA grant and had some, got our first rejection from them. And I think it's a pretty different, we got a pretty different flavor from those 3 applications, and just kind of, the feedback that we got from each of them, that just how different those organizations are and how it fits or doesn't fit with their mission. So I'll be happy to kind of share details as we go. But certainly SBIR has played a significant role. I think we've raised a total of a little over $2 million, but probably 80% of that is all SBIR funding, and so it's a really nice way to have taking that non-dilutive funding to do a lot of the higher risk R&D work that that we're plugging away on right now, without selling off a huge portion of the company for that.
Hi everybody, my name is Catalin Chiritescu. I'm the CEO and co-founder of PhiOptics. We're a company that makes imaging systems for the life sciences market. We make instruments, optical microscopes essentially, for fast and accurate imaging of live cells and tissues. Our trajectory when it comes to federal funding is mostly related to the NSF, National Science Foundation. We started early in 2012 by being accepted in the National Science Foundation Innovation Core program, where we were part of the March 2012 cohort. That interaction crystallized our business plan, business model, and accelerated our product development. So the next step for us was to apply for an Nsf Sbir Grant, which we did. We got phase 1 in 2013, beginning of 2013, and we're now waiting for the final parts of an Nsf Sbir phase 2. So that's our interaction. In parallel, we had grants from the Research Park, Enterprise Works, the iStart program. That's another great opportunity for small businesses, for startups. And private funding in June last year, our seed fund. That's the extent of our experience, and I would be very happy to talk to you about it. We've had some applications to NIH SBIR grants, none funded so far, and I can talk and describe our experience with the reviewers and what we got, the feedback that we got for those.
Good morning. I'm Bill Dick. I'm the president of Illinois Rockstar and also the director of operations for the university's Applied Research Institute. Both of those are high-sounding groups, And so one of the challenges, of course, is to figure out what your mission is. And as the president of any organization, your bigger challenge is to figure out what you're not. And so, that said, the Applied Research Institute is a much newer organization. So we're looking at what is our mission statement. We're working with Surface 21 here in town, trying to understand how we market ourselves. And I will eventually get back to the SBIR side. But what they tell us is you should be able to get your mission statement to 8 words or less. Absolutely no more than 8. And so I looked at the mission statement for the MIT Lincoln Labs. It's about a page long. The one that we started with Illinois Rockstar was a few sentences. The one for the Applied Research Institute was a few sentences. And so with the ARI, we finally have sort of settled on market-driven science solving global problems now. Well, that's a really wide world, okay?
That's big, yeah.
But it at least tells you what we're not.
It's true. Yeah.
Okay, it does tell you what we're not.
Fine, yeah.
So I tried now to take my Illinois Rockstar program and distill it to 8 words. And you'll hear in a minute why this is a challenge. But the mission for us right now, today, is to perform computational engineering analyses for industry and the mission agencies. Where the mission agencies are, and now we finally get to the SBIR part, all of the DoD components, and we have had SBIR wins with the Army, Navy, 3 branches of the Air Force, the Office of the Secretary of Defense, DARPA, NASA, and 3 branches of the Department of Energy. Now, we've been at the SBIR business since about 2007, virtually when we started the company. Unlike your success, which have been, you've had fewer successes, but a lot fewer tries.
Yeah.
We've had, to date, we've submitted 115 SBIR or STTR proposals. Of those, we've had 34 winners, which is not so bad. To date, we have spent a little bit over $8 million of our collective money in SBIR and STTR programs here in Champaign County. And that represents 34 winners. So the experience base that we have is across a wider variety of agencies, but you will notice that none of them were either NSF or NIH. We tried one NSF. It was an abysmal and dismal failure. And I can talk about that if you'd like to later, David.
It's always good.
But we're not in the NIH world. What we do in Illinois Rockstar is the development of simulation software and the application of it, hence the engineering analysis, to mostly materials, energetic materials, and there you can think of them as propellants or explosives, how that works out in vehicles, whether they are aircraft or automotive vehicles or rockets. We still do a fair amount of rocket work. And then we've, out of some of that understanding, how we understand and how we can visualize materials, and particularly particulate materials, we've also been involved in things as different as volcanic flow and the construction using high-performance concretes. Also still funded through the SBIR and STTR programs. So we'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure, over the next 45 minutes. David?
Jim, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the differences in the application process between NSF and Army.
Well, I think, going into it, I had a pretty good heads up from, talking to a number different individuals who had been involved, Dave being one of them, that we're really trying to please 2 very different masters with those 2 different grants. And with the NSF, they had really been emphasizing, and I think since then even more so, emphasizing commercialization and basically, convincing them that you're going to give them a positive return on investment and that you're going to end up making money and paying the money back in taxes or however they do their calculations. But I think they're really looking for that, and that the Army seemed very much to me like a design competition. Basically, they wanted their widget, or they wanted something to do a very specific task, and they were basically, letting all the companies, all small businesses out there compete. Say, hey, I've got the best idea, and I've got the team that's going to be able to put this together. And really, as I went through the application process and we received feedback, I think it confirmed a lot of the sense that I had going into it, that basically the criticisms that we had of the technical merit of our NSF proposal, which I think, looking back on it, I think there's lots of holes in it actually. There was not much criticism of the technical merit. They sort of, if you've got a credible team, and it was myself and my advisor, who's a member of the NAE, and he's got a great track record of publications and patents, and I think they just sort of almost give us a free pass on the technical merit side of it. I think that there were some critiques, but then on the commercialization, there were a lot of criticisms. Okay, this is a young company. You have no track record of commercializing technology. How are you going to pull it off? And we were sort of the last group to go for applications prior to the introduction of the I-Core program. And now I definitely have the impression that they look very highly upon companies who have done I-Core, and that the I-Core sort of sets you up for the kind of mindset that you need going into it, of looking at commercialization and being able to show that you're you're going to use kind of the tools that they want you to use to commercialize your technology. And then again, in the Army, it's only really confirmed to me, especially the feedback that I've continued to get as we're into our phase 2, that it's definitely still if they want to have a particular product designed, but the end game is still not very clear to me in terms of our what's going to constitute a success or a failure at this point isn't as clear to me, and from a commercialization perspective, there's not a measurable that they're looking for, or that they're expecting out of us, so much as they have their product that they want built, and we're going to try to build it for them. So pretty different, I think, between the two of them.
Yeah. Is there a big difference in how much contact you have with your technical person at the two different groups?
I don't talk to either of them very much. During phase 1, I think we were really pushing during phase 1, knowing that we were going to be competing for a phase 2, that really put our best foot forward and constantly communicating, and now it's really on an as needed basis. If I've got a question, I'm not communicating just for the sake of making us look good at this point. I think it's really kind of a need-based communication. But we're very much moving into the stage with the NSF where we're going to be going after supplemental, bigger supplemental grants, and I know that it's going to come time to really sell ourselves again to them. But I think it's been more of just kind of maintaining a relationship as opposed to having any particular agenda.
Bill, you were mentioning earlier that you don't go after NSF funding particularly, and I was kind of interested in why that would be.
Not the least of which is that our only NSF proposal was a failure.
Shut down.
It has to do, for us, more with the differences in the kinds of things we're doing. We're established to do software, not hardware, but software and engineering analysis. And so we're really dealing more with the side of things you just talked about. We have a task that someone in one of those mission agencies, whether it is one of the DoD agencies or NASA, has said, I need this kind of a thing done. So rather than coming in with perhaps what you would think of as truly innovative research, something which is unique and you have this cool idea, these things tend to be more focused on a real-world immediate application. And so you're trying to take your technology set and apply it to somebody else's immediate problem. It's really the more applied research rather than how do we take the basic research and drive it into a product. So with that as an understanding, it's not in our business model to be doing that kind of translation from basic to applied or from applied to commercial. It's more from the applied world already. And so the kinds of things we do lend themselves very poorly to the National Science Foundation type model. We have really good staff, as you do. We have consultants who are members of the National Academy, and so we will take them along with us sometimes on our proposals and our projects. But it's still, we're not in the science side. We are necessarily in the mission agencies, and so it tends to be the things that are much more focused, whether they're SBIRs or the STTRs, the Small Business Technology Transfer Programs, which require university participation.
So I was wondering also, do you find that the reviewers' comments tend to be helpful when you do get a rejected proposal?
Yeah. They range, at least, let's put it, for example, for the NSF proposal that we had. They range from very helpful, where they say, this proposal is very good and this is why it's very good. It's touch all the points that we've requested. It's got the proper personnel engaged. And they go all the way to the other end of the range where they say, this is just bad proposal and that's it. And we got that range of reviews, for example, on our NIH proposals too, where we're constantly, we keep on applying for these NIH SBIRs, and we're using this past reviews to improve our proposal. And there, the range is, as I said, it covers the entire range. On the NSF proposals, they tend to be more focused on the task proposed and actually cover them very well. On the NIH is a large range, and I would say 50-50. 50% of the reviews are quite useful. The other ones are just there to, they didn't like the technology, or they address just personnel issues. The PI didn't have enough publications or things like that. So,
I actually sent in a NASA proposal once, and we got the reviews back, and they were obviously for a different company and a different technology.
So there you go.
Called them up, and they said, "Well, it doesn't matter. You didn't get funded."
Okay.
It was close enough.
It's close enough, yeah. Thank you.
May I speak to this a little bit too, Dave? Our experience has been kind of mixed, but like yours, but perhaps in a different way, to the extent that it's not unusual for the reviewers, and all of you have been reviewed in one way or another, to be very contradictory. One group, for the same proposal, yeah, all these guys are great and their ideas are good and they'll go right to commercialization, and the other is, these guys have no track record and they have no hope of ever getting this thing sold. So that's one piece. What has been useful to us and what we've done differently is we've been criticized over the years about not having enough of a commercialization focus, about not understanding essentially the world in which we're operating or the business model that we have to put forward. Part of that is we didn't write about it very well. Part of it is we didn't know it very well. And it's been a work in progress over the last 7 years. That's a piece that we have taken to heart and we've worked much more closely on over the last couple of years, is how do we build the commercialization model? And that has actually forced us to change the way that we look at our software product. Initially, we were planning to do mostly licensing, but what we have found over time is that the market for these things, because they are so specialized, the potential licensees are a handful at best. And so rather than that, we're now dealing much more with open source like software. It's not your traditional open source, but we will allow it. It fits in the high performance computing, so a lot of it is parallel processing. So you have to be able to transfer these modules to the users. And so that has changed our marketing model quite a bit. And that came from those reviews. You got a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, if you get a very negative review, does that pretty much mean you don't get the grant, or who makes that final decision?
You can get positive reviews and still not get the grant. It depends on the majority. What is the majority decision, and then
who plays the role of the editor for journal publication? You see what I'm saying? Is there somebody that looks at?
There is somebody
Depends
who makes
on
those decisions afterwards in most of the agencies. But in my experience, if you get one reviewer that really dings you hard, you're done. And I've seen lots of those where you get 2 really good reviews and 1 really bad review.
And
You
that-
kind of wonder what happened.
That
For some of
decides.
the agencies, if you get a reject, you can resubmit and fix some of the problems. They encourage you to resubmit.
Who's making that kind of final decision? Is that like the program?
Yeah, there's a technical point of contact if it's military, or there's somebody at NIH or NSF that's, you know, they get a pile of them and they look at the scores and then decide what's, I think, are the important ones to fund.
And they're different agency to agency. The NSF way of evaluating is not the
It's a
same as the
different-
NASA way of evaluating.
Right. Yeah, and Department of Defense, it may be one single person making the entire decision. And
It's generally whoever was the original technical point of contact plus a few of her friends who will take and review this. Because again, they're much more focused than an open NSF call or an open NIH call.
And a lot of the times with Department of Defense, they'll fund several people on the same topic and kind of have a competition between you and.
For phase 2.
Do you know that, that when you're funded at phase 1, who else is funded in what space?
Sometimes you can find it out. Sometimes they'll send out emails and you can look at all of the email addresses and go see who your competition is. Sometimes they'll tell you.
In the DoD world, it's actually listed. It's on their website. When yours is announced, so are all the other winners, not the losers, but the winners. So you know from the beginning who the winners were.
Same thing for the NSF. They get announced on the website. They need to be public knowledge.
And we used that strategically over the years to go figure out who your competition is and what technologies are out there. We actually found out on one of them, it was an explosives detection one for the Army, and they funded 12 companies, and we were ranked 13th on the applications. So you never know how many they're going to fund and how it works, so you got to keep trying, and this is kind of an iterative process. On that note, how many failures have you guys had sending in these applications, and how do you keep going afterwards?
So, I mean, ours hasn't been too painful. We just missed out on a USDA application, and I think that it was actually one that we could have seen going, we kind of saw going into it, that, you know, we were basically, you know, we have a system for removing chemicals that the Army's interested in it for facility, you know, protection of facilities from chemical attack. But, you know, the USDA, you know, we were saying, hey, we could use this technology to remove the smell from feeding operation. So, and, you know, swine barn or something like that that's emitting a lot of ammonia and H2S chemicals that have a really strong smell to protect the local communities from, you know, just the funky smell that they have to deal with. But, you know, you realize the margins in that, you know, agricultural industry are so poor they'd never be able to afford, a chemical filtration system to remove it unless it was regulated, and so that's a really tough sell. And I think that the reviews absolutely confirmed our suspicions going into it, and so it hasn't been too painful. And I think at this point we've just been waiting, given time for our organization to grow. We're up to 4 full-time employees right now, but we would just want to temper our enthusiasm a little bit, make sure we don't grow too fast, and so we haven't needed more SBIR money yet. And I think that we'll probably be going after at least one more grant, this year. Finally, we'll go after it, and hopefully we don't fall off a cliff. With our revenue going like this, we don't want to fall off a cliff and have all that go away. But we're also at the same time really focused on replacing the SBIR revenue with sales and licensing revenue. So hopefully we can kind of, parlay a little bit of each going forward.
It's a good policy. Actually, it's something that we're following as well, just replacing the SBIR funding with sales or private funding as well. We have so far 5 proposals submitted with 1 funded. The 4 that were rejected were all NIH. The NIH proposals are generally more focused than what the NSF proposals are, to specific devices or technologies that need to be implemented for a specific scope. And what we took these reviews that we had in the past, and we're gonna go again, trying to improve our proposals, and hopefully this time it's gonna be a success. At least we're gonna go again for 3 or 4 NIH SBIRs, but it's not the main focus of the company. So it would be a good additional source of funding, which will help, non-dilutable of course, but that's about it.
So what did you learn from those NIH reviews?
The main thing that it's mostly things that we didn't touch properly in the first round of submissions, covering the technical aspects were well covered, is referencing those aspects well, putting in the proper literature, or combining the actual technical development with the request of the topic that was put in there. So that kind of aligning our proposal with what the NIH was asking, and that's where the helpful reviews helped us essentially in getting an idea where we went off track, where we should keep.
Did you guys get help from these guys?
Yes, absolutely. Dave, Mike, right here, Mike Schreiner, and Jet Taylor.
And how does it work when you're applying for multiple at once? I think you guys told us last week that you can apply for multiple, but you only accept one.
So it depends, it varies by agency. NSF, you're only allowed to apply for 2 on each call, and they have to be separate PIs. NIH, you can do numerous proposals, but they need to be different. If you do the same proposal to different agencies and they both get accepted, you can't accept the funding for both of them. So you can apply to different agencies, and if you and you can get multiple awards, but then you can't accept them because you aren't allowed to do the same project twice for.
But you can kind of change the scope of the same technologies.
Yeah, but I think that's gotten a little more sticky the last couple years, and so you really need to make sure that they're very separate projects and that you can show them that they're very separate projects, and keep good books and all of that stuff to make sure they don't come in and investigate you. That's not what you want to have happen. We actually, when we would do with Catalin, we had several projects where it was the same platform technology but detecting different things, and we would actually set up completely different experiments. So if the Air Force guys came in, we could say, okay, the EPA stuff is over here, here's our Air Force stuff, and then you don't have to worry about it. But I think it's important to keep things clean nowadays more than anything.
We've of course had a lot more losers than winners. As I calculate here, we've had 81 losers. So we've learned a lot.
Yes.
On the other hand, we don't submit 1 in each round, because in the mission agencies you could have as many as, in some cases, as many as 400 different topics that you can submit to. And so it is not uncommon for us to submit 4 or 5 proposals in any given round, and in the mission agencies there's 5 or 6 rounds per year. So we've had as many as 35 proposals in a single year, and I'll come back to that in just a second. But keeping it separate for us, Dave, has not been so difficult, because in each case we're working on a specific technology with a unique deliverable in that area. It turns out that right now money is a little better than it was a year ago, but it's not nearly as good as it was in 2009, 10, and 11. The ARRA, just, if you'll recall, the Recovery Act, just flooded this market, the SBIR and STTR market, with dollars. It threw all the money out there that we could possibly get, to the extent that we actually had 15 winners in 1 year. Now, that sounds like a great thing, but it comes to your point, which is you have to be really careful. You get to 15 winners, you're looking at a couple $1 million in SBIR phase 1s, let alone phase 2s, and you know that that's not sustainable. And so it has taken a couple of years for that to shake back out within our company and a lot of other small businesses who are tied to the SBIR world, particularly on the mission agency side.
So have you found that it's easier to write the proposals as you go after you have kind of the boilerplate templates? And
Absolutely. Of a proposal for the Department of Energy, it's a not to exceed 20-page proposal. Of that, 6 to 8 pages of it is absolutely unique. 6 to 8 pages of it is true boilerplate, and it matches from project to project over maybe a 1-year period as you rotate through that. And then the other third are things that kind of tie it together, the unique piece with our more traditional boilerplate. So you can turn out, in an industry like ours, you can turn out a number of proposals pretty cleanly and fairly easily. We are a company right now of 12 full-time employees, not all of them here in Illinois, but most of them are. And so we're in that process of how do we gather funds, how do we expend funds, how do we start this up again.
so do you find it challenging to, if you get a bunch of proposals funded, how do you do the work and how do you keep your staffing up high enough without having to worry about paying people between the phase 1 and phase 2?
We use a lot of Monster.com and Craigslist. It's the truth. Some of our very best people locally have come from Craigslist ads, and that's how we bring on staff. Our core staff, of the dozen, 8 of them are PhD core engineers, and we just keep them fed all the time.
Jim, along those lines, how was it for you to have so much success so quickly with the SBIR program? Has it been a challenge to have employees and keep them happy and keep them paid?
It actually hasn't been too bad. I think that the only mistake I made was mistiming things with my thesis and PhD. So I applied in 2011. I thought for sure I'd be graduating by December, and that wasn't happening. So basically, and I didn't expect to win 2 SBIRs either. And so I applied in June and then plugged away on my thesis or on my research and realized I had about 18 months left to go, and was able to condense that quite a bit, but still it took me about 5 or 6 months longer than I had intended, and those 5 or 6 months coincided with the phase 1 period of execution, basically January to June of 2012. And so that was insane, and it was pretty crazy trying to manage all that at once. But we had a subcontract to the university, and so my other co-founder, who was a grad student, was able to do a lot of work on campus through that subcontract. We also had a consultant that we worked with. We kind of but it was just kind of it felt like it had the potential for just kind of being a flash in the pan, get $300,000 in 6 months and all of a sudden it did nothing. So that's where we were we were at when we applied for our phase 2s, and that put us in a very we were in a pretty awkward position, and I don't know if this was your experience or not, but not having any other source of funding other than really minor amounts from grants. We were just kind of sitting there not knowing whether I was even going to have to be looking for another job or what was going to be happening. And then finally, we didn't have to wait too long to get the news on the phase 2. But there again, that's the trouble, is we heard from the Army in September of 2012 that we had won our phase 2, and that award we didn't get awarded that until last September, so a full year before the award came through, the official award of our phase 2, and we still haven't gotten any money from that grant either. So we're sitting, waiting for a big chunk of cash that we've requested, but for whatever reason they just got their own delays and stuff. But so I think that the huge thing that made a monumental difference for us is the fact that we went after a small, call it a seed investment round, and ended up raising a few $100,000 through the sale of equity in the company, and that was sort of championed by Sarah Ventures, and basically that gave us a a really nice buffer of cash in our savings account that we were able to. We didn't really intend to expend that on operations. We were hoping to pay for patents and all kinds of things that SBIR won't fund. And as it turned out, that money wasn't coming in, and so we ended up, being able to use it for operations.
Yeah.
And it was necessary, and really glad to have that buffer. But I don't know, maybe you could contrast your experience, but I know that's been a really big comfort for me, is just knowing that I've got this huge cushion of discretionary money. And so while SBR budgeting and what you're allowed to spend and what you're not allowed to spend on, having this cushion, I think has allowed me to be a lot more relaxed about, I don't know, spending money, getting food for, taking the team out for lunch, or just spending on random things, business development things that SBR wouldn't fund.
Making plans for the company, essentially. So seeing a future for it, because you can probably survive on SBIRs if you have a good strategy. That's a business model, let's put it that way. It's a business model too. You can work it out very fine. I would think as soon as you get a glimpse of what you can make, either it's a software product or a hardware product or any of the two, it's a good idea to go out to the investors or out in the market and just present it and say, look, we're going to make this, and get this cushion and this help that will eventually lead to building your sales and all this kind of, so evolving into this kind of company, into a, let's say, a typical kind of company where you grow through sales and investments.
Yeah, I know that you guys are more in the private sector. Do you find that SBIRs can be a distraction from what your real business focus is, or is it all complementary?
It's helpful, let's put it that way. And if you can have the help of consultants that know what the SBIR system, how it works and where you can go, it can be an alternate source of funding. So it's something to think of, to have your typical path, your typical commercial path with the business model and everything, and then somebody who can help you build your SBIR proposals and everything. I think that's it's very, very helpful. If you have a very small amount of personnel, you don't have enough people, it can be challenging, but I think this is a very good thing to outsource, let's put it that way.
The SBI, you talk about SBIRs as a business model, and for us the SBIR is the business model. We don't have any outside funding. We are entirely self-funded. Our 4 equity members mortgaged their homes to buy our first large supercomputer. We have paid them back. Our wives are very happy.
All right.
But that's where our money came from. It came out of our own pockets. And it is, in some sense, I got to thinking about the business model. How did we get there as I've been sitting here? In the first months of the Obama administration, you will recall that one of the things that we did was to cancel what was known then as the Constellation Program, the Lunar Exploration Program. And at that point, that program, which was very commercial to us, it was not an SBIR program, but it was a commercial program, was roughly 2/3 of our business. So on January 19th, 2/3 of our business simply turned off. And at that point, we had to do some things very differently. We were already involved in the SBIRs, but it was not by any means as pervasive as it is now, and it didn't represent as large a proportion of our business. But at that point, since then, we have been changing our business model. I talked about the differences in licensing and the hardware-software piece. That's essentially what caused that to happen, was something external to our business.
Yeah, I think for us, I really tried to, in writing the grants, tried to give myself the flexibility to respond to you know, what we knew was going to be an ongoing customer development process. And so when we, you know, wrote, especially the NSF grant, you know, I think we had the flexibility and we've leveraged it, you know, to an extreme to basically, you know, shift the tasks and shift the focus of them to basically build the product for a particular, you know, for a particular customer. And if we didn't have that flexibility, we'd be stuck trying to build something that no one is going to buy. Basically, you know, the original concept. And then I think the same thing with the Army is we're kind of, you know, touching that right now, where the innovations that we're working on right now, you know, they're aligned. They do what we originally said we were going to do, but things are a little bit different. And so far, that's been met with really good reception. But I could definitely see if those deliverables weren't in line with what's ultimately going to be the most valuable for commercialization, we could be really stuck. If we only have 4 people and 2 of us are working on a project that we know is just going to lead to a deliverable that no one's ever going to pay for, other than, you know, just to get our, you know, final payment from the SBIR program, then, you know, that's not going to translate into additional revenue, which is what we really want it to afterwards. So.
How do you guys make yourself look like a credible company when you're really just 1 or 2 people at the very beginning of this?
Yeah, I can answer to that because we really are small personnel. We got 2.5 people. It's through the consultants that we work with, and also through showing that we do some of the work in the company, some of the work, again, consulting, I believe that's what it is. So some of the work is done in the company, some of the work is done through outsourced to other outfits, and those outfits themselves, through the partners that we have, that we work with, either in the industry or the academia, we piggyback on their credibility as well. But we bring our own through the strength of the technical description, and also through the strength of the technology and of the products and the schedule that we present in there that will lead us to that respective product.
I assume your corporate partners give you quite a bit of respectability. On the other hand, do you leverage your SBIR award to let them know that there are other people interested in this technology?
We do. It's a good point. We've had contacts with industry partners where we described our SBIRs and what they do, because I don't want to say most companies, but many companies out there, big corporations, they don't know what the SBIR program is. So then we present this to them and say, look, this is a great opportunity. It's a validation for us from the market and from the federal grants, and we believe that this is something you should look into. So it does validate us in front of the corporate, in front of the industrial and academia, industrial partners, let's put it that way.
Jim, do you worry about getting to the end of your 2 phase 2 contracts and not having anywhere else to go, or do you think you can keep doing more proposals and get more funding in?
I mean, I think that we're trying to hedge our bet, I guess, and we're trying. Our plan right now, you know, so the NSF, you know, get the phase 2 is about $500,000, but then they also have a phase 2B program, which a big part of our phase 2 submission, you know, we tried to say in as many different ways as possible throughout that proposal that we're going to get a phase 2B, because we basically knew that the phase 2B is a huge, it's one of the simplest measures that they have for success or failure on the commercialization side for for the NSF, review. And when the reviewers, when the program managers are reviewed, kind of from their superiors, how have they been successful or not? How many of their companies, are achieving commercialization. We basically, tried to make them as comfortable as possible with the idea that we're going to get a phase 2B, and that, came from, having letters of support from investor, from potential customers, and now at this point, we're faced with, okay, now we have to deliver. We have to get that phase 2B, and we're working. That's our, it's in a good way. It's totally in line with our commercialization goal. We want to get someone to give us $1 million, for our product by the end of this year. And so if we do that, then we're going to get, a $500,000 grant from the NSF, that supplemental grant. And so, the things are kind of working in line. Now, what happens if we don't get it? I don't know yet. We'll be furiously writing a lot more SBIR grants or something. But I think that for us, it's just sort of been, hedging our bets and working as much as we can on the commercialization. Basically just really trying to commercialize our product while we commercialize this thing that the government is paying us to develop, essentially. And so far, we have a potential partner lined up that things are going really well. And right now, I'm very high on the possibility that it's going to work out. But, things can change. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. When you do these phase 1 proposals, you want to lay out what's going to happen in phase 2. You want them to be thinking always that they're going to fund you and this project is going to go forward, and you understand what the phase 2 project would be. I think I've seen a lot of proposals where it's a totally self-contained project in phase 1, and then what are you going to do for phase 2? So I think it's a good thing to keep in mind.
Does it look pretty bad if you don't continue to phase 2? Like say if you applied 10 times for phase 1 and you got 5 times or something and never onto phase 2 at some point.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
No, actually, that's not bad. What is bad is what they call the commercialization achievement index, and that's if you have too many phase 2s and not enough product. That's where it starts to reflect badly on you. Now, if you have too many phase 1s and not enough phase 2s, you'll exhaust yourself, because now you're writing a lot of proposals for relatively small amounts of money. But if you end up with too many phase 2s and no product at the end, then you end up with some demerits. And I can talk about that if you want, but for now, that's probably enough.
I got a question for Jim, going back to what you were talking about, commercialization. And have you taken part of the I-Core program? I know Catalin has. Have you done that?
They had discouraged us because we had already won our phase 1 when the first cohort came through.
Yeah.
So.
You're talking about the one, not the node, because Catalin did the node, and you're talking about the program that we have here, correct?
The I-Core, yeah.
Even the original, whatever.
The node program, okay,
Yeah, the
sorry.
one Jim has, yeah.
Right, but there's 2 different things. So we have an I-Core program that we operate locally, but what Catalin did was actually not the one that we did locally, that was through Michigan.
So the Innovation Core program was run, as you said, in nodes. I think 2 of them were, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, initially for, I think, 2 or 3 years. And then this was expanded nationwide into, I don't know what they're called, sites?
10 sites.
10 sites, so they're now expanding into sites.
Right.
The initial nodes, they only took or accepted into the applications from companies that were not in the SBIR program yet. So what they were trying to do is to prepare companies or build up companies to apply for the SBIR program. That's why they probably, they told them not to, yeah.
But
Also, the site program allowed people that hadn't had previous SBIR dollars on the academic side to get into it, because one of the requirements for the node program is that the project previously had been funded through NSF in some way. You had to have an NSF number, funding number.
Exactly,
So,
but not an SBIR. You
so
had to have
NIH funded projects. You didn't have a way to get into the I-Core program before the site program came out.
Okay.
Sorry, didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
it's
It's just
a-
there's some confusion
it's
about
a
the
good-
site
Yeah.
versus the nodes,
So
so.
does your site program have those restrictions? In other words, can you get into the site iCore program if you didn't have a previous NSF-funded research
Correct.
program?
You don't have to have
How
that.
about previous SBIRs? Is that a restriction?
I'm not exactly
They still
sure on
discourage that.
that.
It's
They
the
just-
same, it's
yeah.
from the NSF, it's the same, it's just a branch of
Oh.
the national program. So
Right.
they still discourage if you've had an SBIR.
So
But it could be for a different company, though. That's the thing, is that
So
you
if you-
may have,
So you could
had
just
people-
form another company.
I guess.
For a team, you don't have to participate as a
Team,
company.
yeah, because you don't even have to have a company actually yet to participate in the site program.
Because the really good thing about that program, you know, all that Steve Blank stuff, is before you even do SBIR Phase 1, they teach you how to talk to potential clients.
And
And then
investors,
maybe
yeah.
change your strategy depending on what's going to sell. And that gives you a really good start into the SBIR program. You know?
Yeah, I agree completely. I wish we could have. I mean, the way that this whole thing worked out, the timing was, was crazy. We were just kind of flying by the seat of our pants. And I think that had we taken the time to do iCore, it would have taken a lot longer. I think we kind of, lucked out, and we've been given the
It worked out
opportunity.
fine.
Yeah, we've been given the opportunity now to, we have the funding, and thankfully we've gotten to phase 2 with the flexibility in our grant, deliverables to continue that ongoing customer development and, market development process and responding. I don't know that everyone can say that about the way that their proposal is written, or that other program directors may not give that flexibility to the companies, but we've been in a good position in that respect.
There any, Brian?
I was wondering if any of you had ever had problems with program officers or program managers. So I had submitted an SBIR Phase 1 back in August. We got a borderline score and felt the wrong way, but resubmitting. But the interaction with the program officer, which I've always been told is very important. We have a program officer that is just unresponsive and not supportive and really difficult to deal with, despite how enthusiastic and nice we try to be about it, and try to get his feedback and just to give us anything that would be helpful, and just not getting anywhere. Have you guys ever had any experience like that?
Some of them can be overloaded. There are sections associated with certain PDs, program directors, that have just, 100 companies, while others have 15. So it's probably speaks to that. But it could be just the personality.
So what do you do in that case? I mean, just
We were lucky enough not to have such a things, but maybe
Trudge on is the right phrase. And I can't speak to NIH, but in the mission agencies, all SBIRs are essentially just dumped on a program manager. They have their own program, and they are large projects, and it's a wide variety, and then they get dumped 1 or 2 SBIRs. A few of them use SBIRs as part of their core initiative, but a lot of them will end up being program managers like the ones that you're describing, who really have no time to deal with you now. Once you have been awarded across the panel, once you've been awarded, now if it makes sense in a Phase 1 and then especially in a Phase 2, you become part of their core program, but not generally at the Phase 1 level.
What agency did you say was the reluctant manager?
NIH.
NIH?
Yeah.
On the academic side, I've never run into this
Yeah, that's very surprising.
before, so I was
Most unusual.
surprised to get such resistance and unhelpfulness from the PO.
Yeah, sometimes you get people that are really interested in your project and they're fascinated and they'll come visit you and talk to you constantly, and sometimes you just won't hear a word. And sometimes you get funded for the Phase 2 when you've never heard from your technical point of contact at all. These programs are really unpredictable in a lot of ways, and you have to have thick skin and keep trying.
But it's a good idea to keep in touch. So what you
if you
did,
can.
keep on talking and presenting. It's better than just not knowing what are you talking about.
Yeah, I'm still sending emails, they just don't give me.
Well, you can give up at some point, I guess.
Roland?
And kind of back to the business development aspect, do you figure that SBIR money reimburses you for 100% of all your direct and indirect expenses, so you're not really losing any money at all? Or do you kind of see the SBIR money as helping offset research dollars that you would be spending anyway, in which case it doesn't really matter if you get 100% reimbursement?
I think the reality for us is the latter. I guess, you know, we can look at our burn rate, and we're burning through cash faster than the SBIRs are feeding us. And so in most of that is, you know, I would say it's 90% in line with the kind of, you know, research goals that we would have if we were just building a commercial product. And so I think for right now, I think it's, you know, it's the latter. And, you know, I think that it's kind of funny, you get that little fee or 6 or 7% fee, and that's just gone. I mean, it just that's not going anywhere.
That month's
Yeah.
wages or something. No, yeah, well, it's the same thing for us too. We built our SBR Phase 2 at least proposal as essentially our R&D development. That's it. Although in retrospect, it's probably, in talking to Dave a little bit, I think it's a good idea to also look at your indirect costs and cover some of that for your company as well. So it's a good idea to get into the first part of the thing, like you said. But right now, for us, it's essentially R&D money.
And for us, of course, Roland, it is our business model.
Yeah.
So it has to, SBIR, STTR covers our entire cost structure. Now, our entire cost structure, it is roughly 80% of our business today.
So yeah,
But it has to do with how you do your accounting, how you do your government cost accounting, how you draw all of that together. And we didn't even get into government cost accounting. You asked what are the headaches, that's the headache.
Yeah. Once you get phase 2s, it's a different
Can I offer
game.
a take on that? Well, I've done lots of projects, and I find phase 1, folks submit a proposal, salaries, equipment, zero indirect costs. And my take on that, and I keep telling, my take on that, if you don't recover your indirect costs that way, you're really screwing yourself, because they're real costs that you're going to have to pay for on your own. You know, you might have to mortgage your house, or you're going to have to find that money you already know. So if you don't really expend a bit of energy into understanding what that is, maybe there's safe rates for indirect costs. You really need to do that, you know.
it's very important, yeah.
Yep. Any other questions from the audience?
One other area, does any of you have any experience in having input enough ahead of the cycle that you could actually have input into the solicitation topics? Because that's a great way to influence things in your behalf. You know, there are mechanisms for doing that. Have you had any experience with that?
We submitted information, let's say a letter to a request for information. I think that's what it was.
Which agencies?
The NIH.
NIH.
And then a topic came after that, and we submitted to it. It wasn't, many times when you submit this information to a request for information, the topic comes back really geared to what you proposed, or at least very close to that. This time it did not, but not very close, but let's say 80%, and we did submit a proposal to that, and we're waiting for an answer sometime in May or something. But it's a good, if you can, it's a good way to move things your way when it comes to proposals. And I think, yeah, submitting a topic or things like this, I think that's if you can, if you are at that level where you can submit topics to NIH, I think that's great.
And Bill, weren't you saying that you just...
We've had a couple, particularly on the solid propellant rocket side, which is kind of a pretty narrow field. In each case, we were able to submit, and this is 2 of them, we were able to submit, but they didn't look necessarily a lot like what we suggested. There were flavors of them and features, but it certainly was not an exact match to what we suggested. Now, I guess that's not
good,
so
yeah.
surprising because you're working with an agency that has a mission. And so our idea of what their mission is isn't necessarily the same as theirs. And I can't tell you whether they were winners or losers because they were in this last round. So we're still waiting.
And there are people in this community who you see solicitations come out and the topics are written by
Oh,
the person
absolutely.
and all of the references to it are their references. So it does happen, but
Absolutely.
it takes a while to get there. Well, with that, can we have a round of applause for our panel here?